I think the one thing is when I was in Quebec, I was born in Quebec and then ended up back there, got married in Quebec. I thought I'd get buried in Quebec.
Okay.
That's how I thought things were going. But God changed that and showed me that sometimes things are a time and a season. Where I am right now, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. Church is super supportive in many different ways. I'm able to do itinerant ministry speaking, and it feels like this is where I'm to be, and so I'm enjoying every bit of it. But I'm just trying not to get too far ahead of myself because I don't know what tomorrow looks like.
Welcome to this week's episode of the His Hill Podcast. My name is Kelly Doherty, and I'm your host. Today, I have with me a friend from, oh my goodness, I guess it's been about 15 years now. And he is the former director of the Torchbearers Center in Quebec. He's now a pastor in Canada. And I'll let him explain all that to you. But anyway, we have with us Matt McLean. Hi, Matt.
Hey, Kelly. Thanks for having me.
Oh, man, it's good to have you. Matt's here for the Thanksgiving week. He's one of our speakers, and I was hesitant to ask because he's really busy with that, but I went ahead and did it anyway, and he was 100% available and just really willing to do it. So we just finished eating Thanksgiving dinner, just stuffed ourselves and rolled down the hillside to come into upstairs in the gym in the podcast room. Matt's actually the first interview with our remodeled podcast room. If you're ever at His Hill, make sure to stop by and come take a look at this. Yeah, it's something else. It's first class. But anyway, Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us, where were you born?
I was born in Montreal, Canada.
Okay.
And I left there really young. I was probably 1 year old when we left, and grew up in Southern Ontario, north of Toronto, in a place called Orangeville.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you grow up in a Christian home?
I did. I grew up in a Christian home. My dad was a pastor, and that was kind of my first memories going to church, was him preaching, teaching, that sort of thing, and kids, us all being put downstairs to the Sunday school, that sort of thing. So I never heard him speak or anything like that.
Okay.
But for my first years up to about 4 years of age, he was a pastor.
Okay. And, till you were 4. All right.
Yeah.
So how many siblings do you have?
I'm the youngest of 4.
Okay. And what's the age difference? How old's the oldest?
She's 4 years older than me.
Oh, wow. So you guys are close.
My mom had her hands full.
No kidding.
4 of us in 4 years.
Okay. So your dad was a pastor until you were 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was it like for you growing up in a Christian home like this, Christian family?
It was good in some respects and really difficult and hard in others, because my dad was asked to leave the church.
Oh,
so
okay.
When I was young, and that was the last place where he pastored. So there's kind of a bad taste in his mouth and all of our mouths, I guess, that way. So going to church service wasn't our favorite thing to do growing up, and my experience was good in that they introduced me to Christ at a very young age. So
Okay.
I knew that I knew Christ, and he had me. But the other side of that was, in terms of the fellowship of the body of believers, had a bad experience because being asked to leave a church.
Yeah.
And I was little. I didn't know all of that and what was going on, but I felt it. I knew that there was something wrong there within the church. But
Even as a 4-year-old?
Maybe not at 4, but even the years like after that,
Okay.
going to other churches and being a part of it, and just how you hear your parents talk about things, then you pick up more at that time too. And yeah, so we were a part of a church. My dad was a pastor, and then he even was speaking in churches in the earlier years, and then that sort of faded out, and we didn't have a good experience as kids going. And probably my dad and us were made to go to church at a certain point.
Okay.
And my mom was the one pushing it along and making sure we were going. Yeah.
Wow. So when did you become a believer?
I was a little kid, and like I said, my parents did introduce me to Jesus, and my siblings were really good at telling me I needed Jesus all the time too, because I was the youngest of 4. So they were evangelists all the time. And I accepted Christ as young as I can remember, but I did it, not that I had to do it, but I wanted to make sure that I made sure. So I probably did it 50 times after that. Anytime that there was an invitation at a church service, as a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, up to about 10, and I said, "Wait a second, I don't know. I think I'm good with the Lord." took me a while to process that and to get a hold of that I was born again and a new creation, and that wasn't something just here today, gone tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what about growing up? Like, how did things go with your family, and what was that like? It sounds like it was a lot of weight for the whole family to carry with being asked to leave a church.
Yeah, there was a lot of weight, and then there was a lot of transitioning. So there's transitioning out of the church, and then my dad was truck driving and working at McDonald's, and then farming, and then doing all of those at the same time, multiple jobs. So he's working a lot. My mom went to hairdressing school, became a hairdresser, and they were busy. So for us as kids, the older ones took care of the farm and the food and everything like that, and my parents did what they could. But probably when I was 10 years old, they separated, and then they separated and divorced when I was 15, turning 16. And then my dad was not living with us anymore, and my mom was maybe not around a whole lot at that time, and siblings going off to university. So in our home, there was a lot of changes, and going from a very traditional Christian family to eventually like parents not there, and you don't need to go to church or youth group or anything like that. But that's actually when I started to make decisions to go.
Oh, wow.
And God strategically put people in my life that were challenging me to make good decisions, right decisions, follow Christ. And so I kind of started to, when I didn't have to, and I was, following the world, sort of sneak back in. I was like, I wasn't a closet Christian. Well, I was a closet Christian, I guess you could say, but more like the other part was closet too. Like I wasn't sure where I belonged or where I should go, but slowly started coming back to like seeing that Jesus was everything that he ever said he was, and the world and sin is everything that he also ever said it was. So there's nothing really there, although it took me a while to rediscover that.
Do your parents walk with the Lord now?
I think they both say that they do. My dad's 85, and he's my dad's, he'll talk to people about the Lord still out there. It's just that through leaving the church and the marriage, it didn't work out for my dad. He made some choices in life that were difficult, and he's at a place in life that's hard right now as an 85-year-old. Just to see him struggle with the people he puts himself around, and that, like he's trying to help people, but it's hard to pull 5 to 10 people up on a raft when you're the only one on it, kind of thing. Yeah. So how he surrounds himself, and great guy. I love my dad. Evangelist heart. He's out there. My mom, she has Alzheimer's.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
my dad did too. That's tough.
Yeah, and so she's doing what she can, trying to navigate. She still professes faith in Christ. She's in a relationship. Her boyfriend does not profess faith in Christ, and it's kind of a little bit hostile to it, to be honest. So she's not encouraged. She doesn't go to a church service, nothing like that. So she's kind of like isolated, which is unfortunate. But my mom was really instrumental in leading us all to Christ when we were kids, and encouraging us to stay the course until our late teens.
Okay. And how about your siblings? Are they walking with the Lord?
They all do. Yeah, they all walk with the Lord today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. The reason I asked about your family is I was just wondering, after, things, getting kind of tough for the family, and, you coming back to the Lord, walking with him, wanting something more with him. I was just wondering, was that an encouragement from your Was there encouragement from your family? Was there conflict with the family with this, or were they all in favor?
My family was great through it all. I mean, my mom and dad didn't really have a good idea what was going on when I hit my teen years, and then started into a party scene.
Yeah.
And I think one of the moments I remember that really impacted me was when I came home from a night of partying, and my brothers saw what kind of state I was in. And they had been around parties and that sort of scene before, but seeing their younger brother in the state that I was in, and my one brother, he started crying. Just not like, and it was subtle. He was trying not to even show it, but he knew what I was kind of getting myself into and what track I was going down, and it scared him, and that kind of scared me as well. And so in love, they came alongside and tried to just encouraged me back to follow,
Wow.
what I knew to be true and to get things right with Christ.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's really neat to hear. Your siblings
It's
doing
great
that.
to have siblings like that. Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
And I guess too, just the way the Lord was taking care of it. Your parents weren't in a good place, but the Lord used your siblings.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah, and that's the thing that's been great in our lives is that we've all taken turns of being weak and then strong for one another. And to see now my dad, I before you asked me about my dad knows Christ and he's very proud of all of us walking with the Lord. And they have been such a great encouragement to me. My brother, and in through elementary school, that guy, he wore rubber boots, and he had a briefcase, not a binder, and he wore a tie to school, and he loved Jesus, and he was just a different cat altogether. And they would try to get him to say bad words even, and they wanted to see how he'd react because he'd never react in the way that everyone else would, and he responded in kindness and with Christ's love. And I was complete opposite, and they knew that too. They could test that out pretty fast. But just to have not just that brother, my oldest brother as well, he carried the whole farm. He carried all the responsibility and also encouraged us in the Lord. And still, everyone does today. We encourage one another. And I've been able to, share where they've been and for them to hear now their little brother that they were so deathly scared of the path I was going down, pointing them back to Christ too. It's just, we're just taking turns.
Wow. So there were rebellious years then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there were.
And the Lord, using your siblings, brought you through that, I guess.
Yeah, and other people too. I was the type of kid, I was always on the go, and I lived in many other people's homes. There's 2 families that I spent a good amount of time and lived with as a young kid, and those families as well, along with my own, really helped me, and God used them as a lifeguard in my journey. Without them, I don't know where I'd be today. And they weren't perfect. Not our families weren't, but it was kind of like they were full court press on Matt McLean.
Really?
To make sure that I didn't go any further in the ways that I was going.
Wow.
So I have those families still today that all support and pray and encourage me. Yeah.
Well, tell me about that. What was the Lord doing? What did he specifically do to bring you from, that rebellion to where you are now?
Right. So I guess I back up a little bit. When I was younger, I had so much frustration in life because I couldn't understand why everything was so easy for everyone else and so hard for me.
Oh.
And then I found out when I got older that I had learning disability, I was dyslexic and other things. And I guess when they're starting to do ADHD and all those kinds of things, like I would have been in the early classes of that.
Okay.
So that all came about from me getting in a fight at school from a guy that's pulling a butterfly knife to dropping out of school in 9th grade. And you can't do that in Canada. You're not in school when you're like 14, 15. You can when you're 16. Then the children's aid will get involved. And so I was making so many choices out of frustration. And the Lord had me. So there was I really felt like I was Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. I had so much pain and rage in that. And my dad, I never got along with my dad in work because I could never do stuff fast enough. And I didn't take instructions. I was distracted more than the other siblings.
Okay.
And I was the youngest too. So I always had this frustration. And then it just manifested in trouble all the time and all over the place. And then, hitting high school and when I dropped out of school and then they switched me in schools and the fights and different things that I was having in trouble. That was what my upbringing in youth looked like. I went into sports and a little bit of music, and that was super helpful. So God put so many different people, but then things in my path, in my way. The rescue mission was really, like I said, a full court press, and it was on. That was so undeniable. And I know not everybody struggles with disabilities, but they do have certain limitations.
Sure.
And certainly in different areas. But no one ever taught me how to deal with those frustrations. And so my conflict resolution was awful. My attention was non-existent. and my desire to want to succeed. And I had struggled with self-loathing because I had siblings that all won awards in school. And here was this little dummy Matt coming along fourth in line. And every teacher I had was like, what's happened with this one?
Oh,
like,
wow.
why is he so different than these other three, that had them? And I was different, and I am different. We're all different, but I'm fearfully, wonderfully made. And I didn't learn that until later on.
Yeah. So what was, looking back on it now, can you see where the Lord was, what he was doing with you at that time?
I think he was giving me the gift of showing that when you have limitations, that's a gift, and it narrows down what you're going to be doing. Because I'm not going to be a doctor or a lawyer. Wow. I'm not going to even be a theologian. I'm going to be I became a barber by trade.
Okay.
And I like things simple. I try to keep things simple as I can. But the one thing he did is like he narrowed it down that I was going to be probably a farmer, a truck driver, or preacher, I guess. And I ended up being a preacher or a barber. It was in there too. And I was okay with that. By the time I reached that point in life, and everyone said, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? And they had a million things to choose from. I only had about 4. I was okay with that.
Okay.
I'm still okay with that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So how old were you when you started to straighten up?
I was in my late teens, 18, when I started to straighten up. And then 19, I went away to hairdressing school. I became a barber. But that year when I went away at 19, I knew that I needed space from my friends. And they were good friends, but just we got into patterns of life that I needed some space from them. And maybe they did for me too, to be honest.
Okay.
And going away in that year, 19, going to, hairdressing school to become a barber. And I got involved in a young adults group.
Oh, okay.
Just on my own, sort of quietly going to that. And I just enjoyed it. I enjoyed the quietness of just putting my hand to the plow to get the degree, hairdressing school, so that I can get on with the job. I wanted to barber and travel the world, but I knew I needed to get the trade down. So, to get the schooling down and then go off, find a job in my hometown was the idea. But that year was just, it was really, I wish it happened earlier in high school, because now when I see my friends, I'm back in my hometown, but when I see them and they find out I'm a pastor and they're like, you're a Christian? I'm like, you knew me my whole life. You didn't know that? They're like, no.
Yeah.
Like,
I had a similar experience. Yeah.
That's no good.
Okay. So you've gone to barber school. Did you end up working as a barber?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I finished, and it was incredible. At the end of the year, I had in my head the shop where my mom used to work, barber shop in Orangeville, where I grew up, and I was thinking of going back. I had another shop in the town where I was doing the schooling that I thought I could probably get a job there because I had some connections. But I couldn't shake the idea of going to this one place called Roma's Hairstyling in Orangeville. And so one day when I came back for a weekend, I went back there and went in and said, hey, how you guys doing? Can I sweep your floors? Like, you want a haircut? I said, no, just sweep the floors. I said, I'm in hairdressing school. I'd love to see. I hear you guys are the best in town. Puffed them up a little bit, you know what I mean? And then said, I just, happy to come by and just, watch you guys and learn from you if you're okay with that. And they said, how much time you got left? And I said, another month or 2, or I can't remember if it was more than that. And I left that day after just watching them and cleaning the floors, and they called me later that week and said one of the girls left that day. She informed them that was her last day. They said, if you want, this chair is going to be yours, and we'll hold it for you. You got to come on the weekends. And then I actually was cutting hair before I was even done school.
Really?
I didn't know what I was doing.
Oh, that's
they let me fast track that way, and I had a place to go. But I knew that was a place I was going to go. And how I knew, I don't know. It was just the Lord put it in my heart. And I was 4 years in that shop working as a barber in Orangeville.
Okay. Wow.
And it was one of the best times. Don't get me wrong, it was work and it was hard, but like you are meeting little babies, doing their first haircut ever. You're meeting people that are, getting married. You're meeting people that are going to be going off to school, like all places of life. And that's the best experience you can have for learning the art of working with people.
Wow. Yeah, you had mentioned that this week in one of the sessions you were speaking in, that it was great training for ministry.
Oh, it's incredible. It really is. I don't know if you can find another job that forces you to really work with people and take them as they are and be loving and compassionate and try to serve them, because that's your whole job, is serve them, make them look good, which is sometimes a pretty hard task. But, you're doing what you can and loving on people every day. And that's what God called me to do. And 4 years of doing that, the first year you're learning your trade in front of someone. It's not like mechanic where you're in the shop and mechanic, they don't know what you're doing anyways. Here, they know, like, you're doing the job right in front of them. And you mess up, which I have. I've cut ears.
Oh, no.
Man, I've done the nastiest, haircuts, and I've cut ears and noses and you name it. And you're doing that in front of people too. So I learned a lot in that shop, and my bosses taught me a lot because they're super patient with me and gave me a shot. And it teaches you, like, you've got to see the potential that's there. You can't just deal with people exactly where they're at.
Wow.
So that taught me that I gotta look and see through Christ's eyes when I look at people, and that those lessons are so valuable.
How did you go from being a barber to ministry? You ended up going to Cape Henry Harbor.
Yeah, correct. So working in the barber shop, the one thing is, you're ready for God's work, you'll never be out of it. And once I'd made up my mind, I wasn't going to shy back whenever someone talked to me about the Lord, because, you talk to somebody in a barber shop and you're asking them, what'd you do on the weekend? Where do you work? You ask them a lot of questions. Eventually, if they're good conversationalists, they're going to switch that around. And then they're going to say, so what do you do? What do you do on the weekends? If I'm telling them, and I get into, like, I went to a young adults event, or I went to a church service, you say those things, the next thing that comes out of that is some conversations. And then I started, finding out these people were believers. Okay, that's great. But then you have Jehovah's Witnesses, and then you have, like, atheists, and you have people from a whole spectrum of different walks of life. And then I started to be challenged a lot in the barber shop. And I didn't know if I was talking too much or too little, because I was new. It's the first time I had ever worked in a shop. And my bosses were fine with me talking about the Lord.
Really? Were they believers?
No.
Okay.
No. So I just kept doing my own thing that way. And it just, every conversation led to another opportunity, but I felt completely inadequate when I'd be challenged about the Bible. And if anyone ever asked me, did you read it all? It's like, oh man, now I'm going to be a liar if I say I've read it all. I'm like, no, I don't think I've read it all. Oh, but you say it's a true, authoritative word of God, and yet you haven't even read it. And then you don't know about these other religions, and yet you say that that's the truth. And how ignorant and hypocritical could that be? And I was really challenged, to the core of my bone. So then I started studying. I did what they weren't doing, the people that challenged me, but I started to do that. And then eventually met some people that were at Cape Henry Harbor and did a year, and we're getting married now. And I was shaving all the guys, and I was a part of that wedding. And all the people that I met were so radically different than what my friend group would look like.
And just so people understand, Cape Henry Harbor is one of the Torchbearers centers. It's one that's in British Columbia.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I kind of felt like they were way more mature than I thought people that age could be. And they certainly were more mature than I was in their spiritual walk and understanding of Scripture. And I think that God put a seed in my heart. One of them asked me, would you ever consider? And I had a trade. So that's not an easy thing to walk away from. But I was like, I'm still a baby in the faith. I feel like I'm just trying to get serious about the Lord. And I want to give account for the faith I have in Jesus Christ. So eventually I made a decision to look into it, and I applied. And before I knew it, I was on my way out there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what year was that?
99 and 2000.
Okay.
I did 2 years out in British Columbia. And then I never left Torchbearers. So they asked me if I would stay on, and I stayed on that summer working with them. And then they asked me if I would go to Quebec and help out with that pioneer ministry, because that's really what it was at the time. And I said, that's probably a bad idea. And they said, why is that? Because my present-day wife was going there, but we had started a relationship and broke up. She broke up with me.
Oh, okay.
So if she's listening right now, boo. But I had this vision because it's a small center. She's going to find some guy named Pascal and they'll have some baby named Marcel, and I'll be single and have to like babysit their kids or something. And while they go out and have their date nights and things. But anyways, God convicted me. I was out doing landscaping, and he convicted my heart to go to Quebec after that. And I went to the Lord over and over on it. And he said, nope, it's sure. And then when I made my decision to go there a few weeks later, my wife called me back from California because she was there in the summer while I was at Cape and Ray Harbor for the summer. We both were going to Quebec, but she was already going there, like I said. And so that was, people said, oh, you're following your wife there. I'm like, no, she was a hindrance because she had broken up with me.
Now, is she American?
She's American from San Fran, Oakland, kind of Bay Area, San Lorenzo. So
you both ended up in Quebec. Now, what was your role initially there?
My initial role was like I worked every single role. I was working maintenance. I was working in the kitchen. I was working domestics. I was working cutting grass, landscaping. I was working kids program. I was doing outreach in the community. I was doing all those things.
Wow.
And fortunately for me, I wasn't very good at a few of those. So I was taken off of those. Especially kitchen they pulled me out of that real fast. And then I ended up staying in mostly the work with the kids, community, anything that dealt really with people.
Relationships.
Relationships and people was where I kind of ended up. And then, lots of youth group work and with students and teaching. I did that fairly early on, and that grew a little bit. And then itinerant ministry started too, in and around Quebec first. And then eventually I started to go to some other centers and camps and places to teach and preach and that sort of thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, now people are going to be mad at me if I don't get you to finish this. So, so your current wife has broken up with you, and you both show up there.
Oh yeah, and by the way, multiple times she broke up with me.
Let's get that
three to be
clear.
exact. I'm not keeping account of any wrongs she did, but it was 3.
But she did it 3 times.
She did it 3 times.
Okay, so you got to tell us, how did this end up changing?
Yeah, well, when I made my decision to go to Quebec, she called me a few weeks later and she said, we need to talk. And I said, okay. And that was a big deal because when we were leaving Bible school, which is an island in British Columbia, she was upset because we were, we were friends and liked each other that way before we started a relationship. But she broke up with me 3 times. And then she said, hey, I don't like how it is. Can we still be friends? And I'm not saying anyone should ever say this. I'm just recounting what I said. I said, I have enough friends. I don't need any more friends. And she's like, what are you saying? I got lots of friends. I said, I fell in love with you. And I'm not looking to take that kind of relationship forward with me. It won't help me one little bit. And she said, well, I don't know. I think we could be friends. And when you're ready to talk, you give me a call. And I said, I'll never call you. It sounds harsh, but I just said it as it came out. And then Bible school finished. We're working summer, her in California, me in BC and British Columbia. And then when she called, I said, whoa, I wasn't expecting this. Can I call you back? And she thought I meant that day. But I called her a week later.
Oh, man.
And now she's like, what are you asking me? What are you calling me for? And I said, you called me. And then I said, man, I don't know if I called. I said, you told me that I was to call you back. And she goes, no, you said you would. And we argued about that a bit. And then it came to, well, I didn't think you wanted to talk to me because I thought you were calling back that day. And so I said, well, I'm here right now. And we talked. And I didn't tell her, though, I was going to Quebec.
Oh, so her calling you was not because she knew you were going to Quebec?
She knew nothing. And so it was all the Lord putting it together that right when I made my decision, she called me right after and said, it's not good. And I said, the problem is this is what I think. I think that when I asked you to go out and when I professed my emotions, my feelings, all of that to you, I think you mistook that for me saying I was asking you to marry me. And I want to head down that road. That's where I'm looking to go. I'm not looking to waste your time or mine, but I just was asking you whether you're willing to move forward in a relationship that is heading in that direction. And see, my wife's parents had split up that year and divorced all within about 6 months.
Oh,
So when she went to Bible school, everything was great. Everything was perfect. And then lo and behold, now it wasn't. And her perfect family had fallen apart. So then she had a lot of doubts on how can I know that you're the right guy and this would work out and all those things. But I said, so if you're okay with moving forward just in a relationship with me, and I've shared my intentions and where it's going, then I'm okay with that, and I'd like to do that. And she was that had changed. She's ready to do that. Then she went to Quebec because that's where she was to go near the end of the summer.
And she was on staff.
She was on staff in Quebec, and then eventually I wrote her a letter, and they read it to her while she's in the kitchen, and she cried, finding out that I was coming to Quebec as well, because she, as far as she knew, I was just going to be working the summer and then heading back to Ontario to barber again. But those days were kind of behind me, I guess.
Okay,
so I went to Quebec, and when I hadn't seen her since Bible school, and when I showed up there, the next day was her day off, and I didn't start yet until a couple of days down the road. So we went to Montreal together, and we talked, and he made sure we're heading forward in a relationship. And then that New Year's we got engaged, and then we got married in June. And so it went pretty fast from there. We had a child in like 9 months, 10 months, like whatever the time is once we got married. We had one real quick. Kelly, what I'm trying to say, we had a baby really fast. And and then we had 4 more.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, okay, and then you're all in Quebec together.
Yeah.
And you eventually become the director of the center.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess everyone working with me eventually left. And then, so there's only me left, so I became director. But Steve Thiessen was the director before me, and he went and worked at Cape Henry Harbor, and I became the director there as director for 6 years and was principal director at the same time. And then after probably 5.5 years, five and a half years, somewhere in there, God just started to do something in my heart that I never dreamt of, never expected, never saw coming. And it hit me on so many different levels, and I didn't tell anybody for a while because I just didn't know what to do with it. And I was praying, I was reading the scripture, I was dreaming things, and it was all about going home, all of it, all the time. And I never pined to be home. I never wanted to be home in the sense that I had no problem with home, but I was like the type of guy that could go to Quebec and have to learn a new language and be in a different culture and start new friends. And I could do that. I had I shouldn't say no trouble, but I was that kind of breed, I guess. But the Lord made it happen, of course. And now I could only think at a certain point of going home to do the work that the Lord had called me to do. And so I kept putting, lots of prayer and time and thought into it. I talked to my wife, and it was resonating within her as well. And then we just kept going from there, and a whole bunch of events and sequences took place, and ended up in my hometown of Orangeville, pastoring at the Uptown Church, which is an old theater converted into a church that I used to go and watch movies. In fact, the first movie I ever went to was in that theater. And now God's theatering His glory in that place.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So you're now a pastor.
Yeah.
Now you're the senior pastor.
Yeah, that's Mr. to you too.
So you didn't go there knowing that you would be the senior pastor.
No, I did. Yeah.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay.
They had 2 other pastors there at the time, but one was my pastor growing up, and he only worked 1 day a week with them. He's 85 years old, so I give him a little slack in that. He was retired for like 15 years, but that was my pastor growing up in that area. And another one took care of the soup kitchen and homelessness prevention program predominantly. He did other things too. So when I came in, the senior pastor before me was the pioneer first pastor, and he had been gone for 2 years, and they were looking for someone to come in and to be the senior pastor. And so when I came and candidated, that's what I was candidating for.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I didn't realize that. So, and how long have you been there?
6.5 years.
Okay. And now you're the senior pastor, so you're preaching. But there's the ministry of the church has expanded beyond just, traditional, people who come, you minister to them and get to know them. But it's moved on. You want to tell us about that?
So the ministry that we have, the biggest part of our outreach is the Soup Kitchen and Lighthouse homelessness prevention program, which is, taking care of the vulnerable sector in our community. And that's grown in so many different ways. So we try to house people. We do have a men's shelter and women's shelter, so we try to get them into the right places, right avenues for the helps. We bring people from the shelter, not from the shelter, from the Soup Kitchen out to a camp called Teen Ranch and let them have some time with the animals, petting them and riding. We've even taken them horseback riding, petting the pig. This seems to be one of their favorite things. And also bowling. We go out, but we do Bible studies with them. We invest in their lives. We invite them to the church and then continue to encourage them to walk by faith, not by sight. And our church has done a really good job of being on the streets, meeting people where they're at. And when you do that and meet them in those places, it's not it's not a quick fix. It's quick in that the Lord redeems them fast. That does happen, but the transformation part of it and what you would like to see, you got to be patient to see that come about. And so there's a lot of come alongside ministry and just trying to help people make good decisions, walk in the light, and so the discipleship. And our church is about missions, and we try to support missions, and probably pretty standard to a lot of churches that way. But that's one of the things, the Lighthouse, that kind of sets us apart in our own community.
Yeah, that you were explaining some of it today in one of the sessions. Do you want to share how it came to be? I thought that was really interesting to see how the Lord put everything together.
Right. So when COVID came about, we saw everything shutting down around us, from church services to schools to camps. And I live at a camp, as I had mentioned already, Teen Ranch. And I was walking around and praying. There was a lot of things that had been going on at the time. My pastor growing up, he had passed away as well. So I was in a real reflective time of life with everything just falling apart in the world, to be honest. But as I was walking around and praying, the Lord just kind of brought my attention towards this one building on property. It's the oldest building. It's kind of like a motel is the best way to describe it. And in this motel, each room has a bathroom and set up well to keep people isolated from others, and they don't have to cross-contaminate at all, because that was a big concern with COVID at the time. Mm-hmm. And so I went and talked with the director, and I asked them if I could have a meeting with him, and I gave him the pitch. And I said, this is probably a bad idea, but what do you think about bringing the homeless men from our region and area out here and keep them at Pokey's Pit? And he said, sounds like a bad idea, but it might just be what we're supposed to do.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so we started bringing people out, and the ministry started to grow. And next thing you knew, we had the county was supporting us, giving us $1,000 per guy per month. And then they started paying for our salaries, and we had people business from the business
They started
sector.
paying your church salary.
Yeah.
Wow.
They started paying the church salary. Yeah. And not just for me, for the secretary as well.
Oh, wow.
And then people from the business sector were giving fridges and microwaves, and you name it, we'd ask for it. The Lord was just lavishing on us anything that we could possibly need. But more than those material things was like the need for people to call out to Christ, and we started seeing that happening. And when you see people, almost all of our people struggle with addictions that were there, to see them come to know Christ and then to experience freedom. It was incredibly powerful. I'd love to say that everybody did and responded and tie a big bow, and it wasn't like that. But the ones that did, you really got to see that they were more shocked than I was that they had actually encountered the living God. And so we saw the ministry grow during COVID, and it opened up doors that we would never have dreamt. This spring, I'll be speaking at a big event in our area. It's called the Mayor's Prayer Breakfast. And there'll probably be about 500 people. It's mostly the business sector from the area, and the mayor will be there. And they're not believers, like she's not. And I grew up with her husband was a friend of mine growing up too. So I'll get to share Jesus with them at this prayer breakfast. And all those doors open because God just kept opening up our eyes amidst the difficult times and just saying, let's move forward. Let's keep moving forward. I got work for you to do.
Yeah, it's interesting how the Lord will take a time like COVID and do something like that.
Yeah.
And while our natural tendency is to be afraid and to hide, the Lord's saying, step out.
Yeah.
Trust me and be bold. And that's incredible. Now, if people are interested in just checking into the ministry a little bit more, what's the website that they can go to for this?
Well, I should know that, but if they search Uptown Church Orangeville,
Okay.
then they'll find that in the search engine. It'll be the first one that'll come up, and then our website will be there, which is uptownchurch.ca, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, Matt, I think you and I were talking about that this morning or last night. It's probably been 8, maybe 9 years since we've seen each other. We were at a conference, a Torchbearer conference in British Columbia a number of years ago.
Right.
And I think that's the last time I saw you. And
how can I miss you if you never go away, Cal?
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, first, I left, and then a few years later, you left.
Yeah.
But what's the Lord doing in your heart? How's he? You're here speaking at a conference. I'm sure, 18-year-old Matt would have never seen that coming.
Never.
And so I mean, what's going on right now in your heart? With what's the Lord doing with you?
Well, I think the one thing is, when I was in Quebec, I was born in Quebec and then ended up back there, got married in Quebec. I thought I'd get buried in Quebec.
Okay.
That's how I thought things were going. But God changed that and showed me that sometimes things are a time and a season. Where I am right now, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. Church is super supportive in many different ways, and I'm able to do itinerant ministry speaking. And it feels like this is where I'm to be, and so I'm enjoying every bit of it. But I'm just trying not to get too far ahead of myself because I don't know what tomorrow looks like. I guess there was a time where I thought I could see 20 years down the road, and I don't see things that way. I'm trying to be faithful in the little things, and just to see now what does our church need, because there was before COVID, there was during COVID, and then there's after COVID. And after COVID, it's been really hard because some people didn't come back to the church, and then you're having to restore the family in a sense, get the fellowship and community together again. And that's what we're trying to do, as well as the other ministries that I just mentioned of that are within our church. And if I can be faithful to the Lord in those things and lead, then I know things they'll continue to play out. I intend to put myself out of work by discipling people where I'm no longer needed at Uptown. And if I do that right, that will be the natural progression of things. And whether that's to the end of my life, okay, that could be the case. Or if it's for the next season, then that's for the Lord to work out. But to disciple others, put myself out of work that way. And I'm just using a way to express it. But I really want to focus on the discipleship of the next generation and taking young men and women who are serious about following the Lord and challenging them to do what God has called them to do and trust Him with the results.
With your personality, you're an outgoing person. You listen to your stories, and often they involve just conversations with strangers. And over the years, just being around you and just knowing, we have completely different personalities. I'm an introvert, you're an extrovert. I like to sit in the corner. You like to explore the room. And I appreciate that about you, but I got to ask you this.
Yeah.
That has to be a very that has to be a big battle for you in understanding that Christ is your life and you need to trust Him in the moving. For me, I'm afraid to move. So it's obvious to me, okay, Lord, I'm going to move, but I trust you with this. What's it like for somebody with your personality that's ready to go? I mean, just chomping at the bit.
I guess that I'm trying to just stay sensitive to the Lord. I am an extrovert. You're not wrong in that. But I'm married to an introvert, so that's it. That's something that I have seen God sort of change in my life. The thing I'm trying to keep in place in my life is breathing in and breathing out. Because for an extrovert, you can just go, go, and you could just be exhaling, and that can be a real problem because then you find out that you are actually going to pass out. In the way that the illustration will say, you need to breathe in, and that's where the introvert needs to sometimes exhale more than they are comfortable doing.
Right.
And then the extrovert needs to inhale more than they're comfortable doing. And
So
I'm working on that.
Yeah.
I'm working on that. So I'm finding things to do. I'm finding quiet places and with the Lord, because he says, be still and know that I am the Lord. And then, as I do that, I'm praying God forces things. Like I'm praying that it's initiated by him. And then I'm also assuming that, each day is a gift from God, and that when I'm coming across people, I don't need a real big sign to know that I'm supposed to be an expression of his life to them, because I think that's just what I've been made to do. But then, I don't want to stumble in the way of sin or presumption that, that person, that I have a Jesus complex, that they need me. Trying to be sensitive to it. And I think for everybody, they'll just have to learn the art of, the Lord's leading in their life. When are you supposed to go and when are you supposed to stay back? You can learn that in all kinds of things. Hockey, basketball, football. Like, when are you really supposed to press and when are you supposed to lay back? And, I guess it's just sort of trying to get that translate over into life, that, you don't have to go all the time. And then my wife's been telling me that. So she's calmed me down a lot. I don't know what I would look like if my wife wasn't in my life, because I would have just been like spinning all the time. Like, what are we doing next? And it's slowed down a lot. And I've hurt myself along the way. I skateboard and do some things, and I realize I can't do that the same way. I realize those are the physical things. But in terms of the, emotional things, like, if you go out and you're putting yourself out there all over the place all the time, then you're getting emotionally slayed at times, and you get hurt that way too. That you've got to take time for the healing, and I'm learning wisdom in that.
Would you say it'd be accurate to express it as, for your personality, you have to learn to trust Jesus in the being still, that you can, so that you understand what it means to trust him in the going forth?
Yeah. Well said.
Okay.
Well said. Yeah.
Because as you were saying that, I was saying it's the same thing for me. I have to, my problem is the stepping out. I have to trust him for that. And then I find it's the opposite for me. As I'm learning to trust him in the stepping out, I understand better what it means to be still. Yeah. And so we need him. He shows himself to us where we are, and then in doing so allows us to see that we need him for everything.
Yeah. And if you see him for everything, then you'll start to experience him in everything. You'll just love that. I think the evangelist in me as a young kid, like, this is not a joke, I used to lock kids in bathrooms until they said the sinner's prayer. I have a burden on my heart. I want to talk to absolutely everybody all the time without exception about Jesus. I say without exception. Okay, sometimes there's once in a while, but that's just sort of in me, but I know that that's not healthy. It's hard to get that in my head sometimes, that it's not healthy to just go like that all the time and tell everybody all the time. Like, if I'm going through customs at the border, like, have you accepted the Lord Jesus Christ, your own personal Savior? Is not necessarily the questions God has me asking that border guard. Maybe, but you don't have to do it everywhere all the time. You have to learn the rhythms of life and walking, in the Spirit.
Yeah, in all your ways acknowledge him.
Yeah, and make your path straight.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, I appreciate the time you've given me.
Hey, no problem. I feel bad because I feel like this is like a lopsided conversation, because I keep wanting to asking you questions here, and I probably should have, but
No, that's the whole reason. I do the interview. I ask the questions, you answer them.
I ask the questions around you. Are you eyeballing me?
So anyway, I appreciate the time. I also appreciate you being here this week.
Thanks,
if anybody's interested in listening to Matt, the sessions are on our website. You can go there, and it'll direct you to a YouTube page, and you can hear the sessions from this year's conference. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate this.
Thanks, Kelly. It's been great.
There is 1 week left in our fall 2024 term, and soon our students will be heading home for Christmas break. Please keep our student body in your prayers that their time at home would be good and fruitful, and that they would return to us in January encouraged and ready to dive back into God's Word. Thanks for listening to the His Hill podcast today, featuring our host, Kelly Doherty and Matt McLean. The God we serve is full of grace and mercy. He is strong and kind, and He is for us. Remember to keep your eyes fixed on Him. Thanks again for listening today. I'm Lizzie, and we'll see you next week.